Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Anchor Watch. I am your humble host, Bobby Jones, and in our continued effort to bring you subject matter expertise, not hot aired opinions, we have a absolute stud of a subject matter expert, Mr. Stephen Cass, the man who is running the Steady State. The Steady State is a collection of American intel specialists. I mean, centuries of expertise in the intelligence community. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Bobby, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me, and I'm just glad to be here at a time that it's important that we all talk, and we talk without yelling and screaming and talk about things that we all know, and it's good to be with somebody who knows what he's talking about.
No, I appreciate it. And ladies and gentlemen, this man is coming off the bench. The man has had to deal with food poisoning, all sorts of things, but he is here because of literally the weight of the moment. And let's get right into it, Stephen. So the President of the United States, Donald Trump, has announced the acting Director of National Intelligence, DNI. Needless to say, his qualifications at minimum, we can say, are suspect. But before we get into him, can you even explain the concept of DNI, because you helped put this together?
Yeah, so as we ran into the 2000s, after 9/11, there were a lot of criticisms of how the intelligence community had acted during that period of time. And a lot of flaws were observed, and people wanted to fix them. And one of the major flaws was a feeling that we had this community, at the time it was 17 and then 18 elements, and they're all the three-letter agencies. And people know some of them, CIA, FBI, and then there's some that most people don't know. I mean, I think most people know DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, but then there are ones like the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, or NRO, the National Reconnaissance Office. They're the people who shoot rockets up into space. And there was a feeling that this community wasn't led. And I got to give you a little history here. It's an odd fact in the statute that set up the intelligence community after World War II, because there was a lot of feeling then that Pearl Harbor came from a similar problem. So after World War II, we decided to try to fix that problem. And we created the Central Intelligence Agency with one person who was the boss of the CIA. They were CIA director, but also the director of the entire community. Two jobs, sometimes in tension, and a world that got more and more and more complex. The intelligence community got bigger, and the world that the intelligence community looked at got, it seemed smaller, but more complex. And so the idea was, let's split that position in two, so one person wouldn't have both positions. And the new, what became the DNI, would be like the admiral of a Navy fleet, where you have battleships and submarines and destroyers. They all have different tasks and different functions and different armaments and different crew and even different histories for particular ships. We wanted somebody who wasn't going to be driving a ship or pointing the guns or deciding to turn right or left, but all they were thinking about is coordination, strategic focus, making sure there wasn't a conflict between and among those ships, that they could communicate. And that's what the DNI should be. And I'll add one thing that's important to the way you started. There are a lot of positions in the government that are mentioned in statute. There's the Secretary of the Treasury and the Secretary of this and the Assistant this and the Assistant that. Very rarely does Congress say, I also want to write what the job qualifications are into the law. Well, they did with the DNI. It actually says that the person who is the DNI, and I'm paraphrasing here, must have deep experience in the craft and profession of intelligence. So to go back for just a second to my admiral of the fleet metaphor, it needs to be somebody who served on those ships, who know how they function, who know what the crews do, who knows what kind of ships they are. And I hate to say it, knows what their names are and what kinds of ships they are.
Right.
Congress said you had to have that. That's extraordinary that they said that. And every single DNI has had experience, and nobody questioned the real qualifications of almost every DNI.
It's funny you say that, Stephen, because it's almost as though they did not want your typical political appointee in that position because of how critical the role was when they drew it up. What we have now even in an acting capacity, is a man who donated a lot of money to President Trump, who has been running Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and by the way, will keep those jobs, and then part-time the head of intelligence for the United States of America with zero experience, doesn't even have a security clearance. Can you just please tell me, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much we should be concerned about this?
15.
Yep.
I'd go right to 15. It's one, it's unlawful.
Yes.
Two, the fact that it's acting itself is concerning. And the president explained, as well as I could, why it's concerning, because the president has figured out that by making him an acting, he will stay in for months without any oversight from the Congress.
Mhm.
And the president was very clear. That was the point of doing it as an acting appointment. Yes, there is the money. Yes, there is the lack of experience. Yes, there is having two other jobs at the same time. You get the irony there. That's why we created the DNI. But at least those two jobs were in the intelligence world. And Senator Warner, who's just whose face you just put up on the screen here, he pointed that out. And there's a guy who really does have experience in intelligence. He's been on the committee that does the oversight. So he understands exactly what's going on here. But there's another element here. Incompetence is part of it. There's no question about it. An inability to lead the intelligence community. But there's an if there. The intelligence community is set up for one real purpose: to gather the best available intelligence to inform the people who make the most critical decisions for our nation: when to go to war, how to go to war, when to make treaties, when to build defenses, frankly, when Americans should be scared. And they do that for the president, cabinet secretaries, the joint chiefs of staff, the Congress as well. That's what the intelligence community is supposed to be doing. But that's not why this person was put in place. And again, the best source is the primary source, the president of the United States. He said he's there actually to clean out people who were, quote, loyal to Presidents Obama and Biden. There's no evidence of any inappropriate loyalty other than the structural loyalty to the Constitution, but also to take a really good look at the midterms, our elections. The intelligence community is not there to look at our elections and how Americans vote and when they vote, and most importantly, who they vote for. And that's what the president has made very clear that this guy's job is.
Stephen, let's dig right into that, because my natural question is, okay, then why do this? Correct me if I'm wrong. We have various organizations, but most of our intel is focused internationally outside of domestic walls because of various laws, etc., structure. How is it that he can turn our intelligence apparatus inward domestically on American citizens?
Well, first step, and by the way, in my organization, the Steady State has seen this overseas over and over again with a rising dictator, a rising autocrat. The first thing you do to deal with the problem you just talked about, which is how do you turn this? I'm going to keep using these maritime analogies.
Yeah.
How do you turn this ship? Well, first thing is you start firing people. You fire the people who know a lot. You fire the people who have demonstrated an allegiance to the law and the Constitution. You fire the people who you don't think are personally loyal to you. That's the first thing you have to do. Second, you focus them inward. You actually direct them. And the president has already done that. It's a document called the National Security Policy Memo number 7. Sounds pretty geeky. You can look it up. I'd encourage your readers to go take a look at this. It is the single most scary government document I have ever read. NSPM 7, Google it. It'll come right up. Doesn't really read like a typical presidential document either. But what it basically does is defines the threat that all of the government should be looking at inside America, and includes people who don't hold American values, who do not believe in a traditional American family, who support a loosening of immigration rather than a tightening of immigration. In the document, it's called open borders. I actually know very few people, certainly public leaders, who have called for open borders.
Right.
Not my lifetime.
Right.
It simply hasn't happened. So that's the second thing you do. You give them an order. And then you start putting in leaders across the national security community. You've seen Secretary of Defense, who likes to call himself Secretary of War, doing the same in the defense world, which has, by the way, the bulk of the money in the intelligence community. Most of the elements of the intelligence community are Defense Department elements, such as DIA, the National Security Agency, and the intelligence elements of the Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Army, all of them. So that's the second thing you do. The third thing you do is you look at the top leadership and you replace them with true loyalists to you. And that's the part we're seeing now. You also do things like when somebody takes action that you don't like. And by you don't like, I mean putting out intelligence that differs from what you said on TV the day before. When you enter into a war with Iran and then say, nobody ever told me about the Straits of Hormuz. Again, I'm paraphrasing the president. I mean, that's just simply not true. It's on the map. Everybody at CIA knows where the Strait of Hormuz is.
Yes.
It's not rocket science. So those are the things you do. And what we've seen overseas is what holds it back is the culture and the professionalism of intelligence services. It is very hard to have effective intelligence services in a functioning democracy. It usually doesn't work out so well. Look at Russia, look at Germany, look at Spain under Franco, look at Serbia under Milosevic. Why? Because the skills of intelligence are really dangerous skills. Intelligence officers steal secrets. Intelligence officers do what we in the United States under law call covert action. Intelligence officers are a dangerous tool in the toolbox. You need to have it to keep the Americans safe. No question about it. But it's really dangerous. And what we're seeing is that very sharp tool taken out of the toolbox and pointed inwards, pointed at Americans. And that is why my organization, who sat in those seats, we know how dangerous it can be. We sat in seats next to foreign autocrats and their national security services. By the way, security services is, when you hear people use that word, we're usually talking about another country, and it's usually not a compliment. You know, if you've worked at CIA, if you've worked in the military intelligence, you've worked alongside those people. You know how dangerous they can be. So we're worried. We're really worried. And when you couple it with what we're seeing about the election in California is not good, we're going to do investigations, and the similar, I'm going to use the word weaponization, which is yet another word which has been sort of glommed onto by the Trump administration and turned around. Certain amount of irony there. But the destruction of a Justice Department that, like the intelligence community, holds itself apart from politics, doesn't do the bidding of politicians to keep them in power. We're seeing the same thing there. And altogether, it's a 5-alarm fire.
Oversight, you've mentioned that a couple of times. United States Congress is supposed to provide that. Now, you have experience. You work for Senator Feinstein, California. What is the intelligence community and their interaction like with Congress right now? Are they able to provide oversight? Are they being transparent with Congress? Because this is where my issue is. I'm like, you're right. We have committees designated for this, and I feel like we're more in the dark than we've ever been.
As far as I can tell from talking to staffers, to reading the media reports, from watching the hearings, there's almost no oversight being done anymore. They won't answer questions when they're there talking to committees. They are, insolent is not the right word, dismissive, arrogant, and hostile. I had one person up on the Hill talking about the Department of Defense, but in the intelligence kind of world, it's like, we think they may tell us where the Pentagon is, but we're not sure they would admit it's in Virginia. And that's sort of where they are. So to the extent that Americans, and I hope they do, share my concern and the concern of my colleagues about the very institutions that we served in and love, they should be really worried, because we know from direct experience that one reason, a major reason that, along with culture and professionalism, that we're safe from our own intelligence services is the representative oversight of the people we elect. And if that gets destroyed, we are in grave, grave danger.
The intelligence community obviously is very powerful. As a matter of fact, I would argue the most powerful organizations we have, because you can't do military anything without proper, well-vetted intelligence. And this is kind of where my concern lies. And I want to pose this to you. You know, President Trump mentioned that, hey, no one mentioned this, that, and the other. Even though I worked at Missile Defense Agency as a war games planner, I was like, you can't be serious.
Right.
Is the inner circle, because it's not just Trump. You mentioned Hegseth, this guy, that's a whole nother subject. Do they respect intelligence coming from our own community? We watched Trump pick Putin's intel guys in what, 17, 18 over us. Do we even know that the White House is listening to what?
I don't think they are. I think that's a very practical reason why he doesn't care about putting incompetent people in. The president and the people around him do not care about what they're getting from the intelligence community, except maybe on a very tactical level. I'm sure they're happy to get the latitude, longitude of where to drop a bomb. But in terms of saying this country is thinking this, or this leader is thinking that, or we project the following, or we think that you will not be able to destroy with air power Iran's capability to do X or Y, they don't care. They're not interested in it. Now, we have seen that in autocracies. It's a weak spot, by the way, of autocracies, but not from our perspective, a really bad weak spot. Autocracies and dictators often find themselves in deep trouble because they're smarter than everyone else, and they have personalized their rule, so they don't need to listen to everyone else. That's why Stalin refused to listen to his intelligence officers that the Germans were going to break the pact and attack them.
Right.
And, you know, that's a dramatic example of this, but we see it over and over again with a personalized autocracy where they are the smartest person in the world. It's all about who is paying tribute to me and who is being nice to me and who respects me, rather than what's actually happening on the ground, like who is doing what and what is being observed. And we see that, by the way, across the Trump administration, the exact same pattern in the sciences, in education, in environment. We don't need to listen to doctors. We don't need to listen to climatologists. We don't need to listen to oceanography experts and the vast amount of intellectual firepower that the U.S. government has acquired over many of these years, which is augmented by the smarts of Americans, our academic institutions, our researchers, our political scientists, and frankly, the media. People like you talking on podcasts don't need to listen to it. Don't need to. I don't even need to listen to the questions. And we saw that with the interview of President Trump just the other day. Yes, evidence is not needed. Yes, that's his answer to the evidence question. If you, I'm sure you've seen that exchange. Yeah. The idea that you do not need evidence. Well, when you are the king, you don't really need evidence. It all comes from in your head. It's no different in the intel world. The evidence, it's not the word that intelligence officers would use, but the intelligence that gets to the president is the evidence that the president should be using to make decisions. He doesn't have to accept all of it, by the way.
That brings up a very good question when we talk about how people look in and view the intelligence community. With all the changes and things like that, number one, do we consider what's going on in Iran an intelligence failure? I've seen people on social media throw that around. Me personally, I don't think that's because if the information is presented and they choose not to listen to it,
you know what I'm saying? Not an intelligence failure.
Right, exactly. So my question, though, is with all of these changes, how close could it be? How close are we to something like that happening? A bona fide intelligence failure. I mean, we went to Venezuela. We've done all these things. We've started all these conflicts, you know, since Trump came back in office. And he, until Iran, thought everything was going hunky-dory. My concern is when you have that person at the top at DNI, they have the ultimate say in what the president gets, correct? So How close can we be? Are we close to having a system that does not give the president what he needs before it even gets to his desk?
Well, I think we are, but I don't think it's because of a sort of decision to keep him blinded. I think that is going to happen. One, we are firing the people with the knowledge. We don't have the people. Now, you and I just joked about everybody understands the Straits of Hormuz. But if we dove a little deeper, like, there are not a lot of people who really understand the Iranian nuke program. Right. There are not a lot of people who could give you the wiring diagram of the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard, down to like the third guy down and who his brother-in-law is. There are a few of them, but they're starting to go. They're being chased out. They're opting to be retired. We just said we're going to fire all these people. So there's not even going to be intelligence written for that. And we are telling people, do not put your head on the chopping block by creating intelligence. When I say creating intelligence, there's a process. We collect it, the spies collect it, and then we put it together in an analytic product which goes to the president. But if the president is saying, get rid of the people who told me that, Russia's bad, who's gonna, if there's anybody left, who's going to write that stuff? And we are killing our relationships with other intelligence services, and that's a major aspect.
I really wanted to touch on that. I literally wrote that down. You mentioned you mentioned Operation Barbarossa and Stalin not knowing, hey, it's not happening. Everybody was yelling at him, dude, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. A lot of that intel came from other sources outside of the Soviet Union. Like, hey, we're seeing this, et cetera, et cetera. What is our relationship now with allied intelligence services? Because Trump has gone out of his way to blast nations, but at the operational level of intelligence, what is our reputation like, and can that come back to harm us?
I do not have access at the operational level anymore, but I'll make a prediction. I will make a prediction at the operational level, to the extent people are still there with the relationships that have been built over years. My guess is everybody's working really hard to keep things going. It's a little bit like the two families fight, but the kids get along kind of thing. They're professionals. Our partners overseas are professionals. Our people are professionals. But the point is that those professionals on the other side, they can't trust us going up the ladder all the way to the president. For one, he's making it pretty difficult for them to invest time and risk and effort when he is basically saying, you're terrible and you're horrible and we're not going to support you in an alliance anymore. An alliance, which, by the way, has kept us safe since the end of the Second World War, in the face of a Cold War that sputtered for 75, 85 years. Now, I'm not saying the Cold War was a wonderful time. We had plenty of conflicts, but we didn't have World War III. And that's a lot because of NATO. And the Southeast Asian Treaty Organization, SEATO, a similar organization, also does that. Our response to 9/11 was NATO invoked the article that says common defense. And they sent soldiers who died in Afghanistan alongside of our soldiers and alongside of our sailors. That has been denied by the president. It's been denied by our Secretary of Defense, who accused them of cowardice. So you can imagine it's a much more difficult relationship. And then you add to it the idea that it's not clear that we're keeping the secrets anymore. It's not clear what we're telling the Russians. So the currency of intelligence is the secrets.
How long do you think it will take to recover from this damage?
I've tried to avoid the what after, what if, what after kind of question. I think it's premature. I think it takes our eye off the ball. I'll quote Winston Churchill. He gave 2 speeches and had a meeting in Yalta. In his first speech, he said, we're going to be fighting on the beaches. We're going to be fighting in the hedgerows. And then he said, it's not the beginning of the end. It may be the end of the beginning after North Africa. And it's not until 1944 in Yalta where we're like, okay, what do we do after Hitler? We're fighting on the beaches. So having said all that, I get up every morning and come to work at Steady State because I think there will be an after. Because I think Americans are resilient. I think we actually love democracy. I think we go up the wrong road sometimes, but we recover. We've recovered from things like this. Not quite the same. We have overcome obstacles, and we have failed and recovered from that. We have a spotty history of a lot of things. I don't have to talk about McCarthyism, the civil rights movement, Jim Crow. I can go back.
Right.
We're not perfect, but I have a lot of faith in America. I have faith in voters. I have faith in the idea that we really do care about elections. So I'm willing to make that prediction. I'll even go farther. Fixing the damage will take the rest of my lifetime. I will not live to see, no matter who wins in the next presidential election, I don't care if it's a overall sweep of reasonable people from one side or the other. I am not going to live to see it all but put back together.
Wow. That's maybe the most sobering thing I've heard on this podcast. But that does not mean you do not start the important work now.
That's right.
What you guys and people, if you have not gone to his website and gone to their website or seen what comes out of this organization, you need to. I was kind of in awe when I started digging. I was like, oh, wow. Okay. This is serious. The last thing that I'll ask you, and once again, Stephen, I want to thank you for your time. The last thing I'll ask you is this: moving forward, when Americans turn on their TVs, when they go online and see these things, what should they look for when they view news reports or hear the president or hear Secretary of Defense? What should really make their ears perk and they pause for a second? Because I get that question a lot. Well, I don't know what to look for. I don't know what to listen for. I don't know who to call. Can you just say what we should be concerned about when we just see stuff in the general public and we see these things being put out by the administration?
Well, one thing to look for is sort of the attitude of the administration person talking. Are they answering the media's questions in a reasonable way intended to impart information, or are they just yelling and screaming back? Yep. Parse what they're saying. When they say X, Iran has drones, doesn't have drones, they don't have a military, we destroyed the military. First of all, is it logically consistent within the same sentence? Right. Or paragraph? Is it backed up by citation? In other words, I say this because we found that. All of that.
Yes.
You got to listen to this. If I'm sure a lot of your listeners either have kids or had little kids, and they've got them in the cookie jar, and you're asking them like, who took the cookies? If they start saying things like, I can't tell you, I won't tell you, a monster took it. Bobby took it. No, Sally took it. All in the same sentence. Look, if you've been a parent, I got to look a little closer at when I'm hearing this. And the other thing is, I hate to say this, but we have a lot of work to do over the next months. Americans need to get smarter on what is going on. So when the president says he's a perfect guy to be the DNI, I mean, he's just so qualified to this. Go Google a little bit, read what the DNI is. We have a lot of that stuff on our website, but there's a lot of other stuff there. And by the way, our organization, it's not only Intel, we've integrated into it. We're actually around a third Intel, a third diplomats, and then a third oversight and all of the catch and catch can of national security. But Americans need to, I'll make a pun on our spy aspect, get smart.
Yes.
We need to get smart. We need to be able to ask the questions and encourage our representatives to ask those questions, encourage the media to ask those questions, and keep asking those questions. But the bottom line is, and this is why I'm still optimistic, I think Americans have a lot of good sense. And when it smells wrong, and when it feels wrong, and when it sounds wrong, listen and watch a little bit harder and take it with a grain of salt. We're capable of doing it. We're a smart democracy.
You're absolutely right. I have faith. Sometimes it's tested on a daily basis, but I still have it. Stephen, can you tell everybody where we can find Steady State and all the social media and everything you have, please.
Sure. We're on all the platforms. We're on X. We're on Blue Sky. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. We're an older group. We have trouble with Instagram and Twitter and stuff like, why are we even doing that? But our kids tell us we have to do it, so we're doing it. But you can start at our website, which is thesteadystate.org. You got to have the in there. There's another organization of economists who don't have it with the. And also, we're on Substack. We publish most of our stuff on Substack, and we're on our own podcast, the Sentinel Podcast, which has people from our background and other places talking just the way you set it up, Bobby, which is getting some expertise to talk about these issues. And we speak and we write. I speak at a lot of colleges. I'm going to be out in Indiana next week, speaking in Zionsville, Indiana.
Oh, wow.
But I'll be testifying in front of the House Committee on Homeland Security tomorrow in a shadow hearing that Ranking Member Benny Thompson is hearing on surveillance in the United States, one of the tools that's being used and we're most concerned about in terms of pushing towards an autocracy. But that's how you can find us. And we actually even answer DMs as much as we can.
That's excellent. Stephen, I cannot thank you enough, first, for your service and commitment to this country on many levels, and the continued service that you're giving us by trying to educate us and basically making sure we know what the heck's going on so we can act. I cannot thank you enough for coming on today.
Thank you, and you the same. You're back on deck.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
So yes, ladies and gentlemen, as I've been saying, we're going to get expertise. I know you may be used, especially this time, to just seeing hotheads and, people yelling at each other, formulating opinions. Stephen Cash does not have to formulate an opinion. He's lived it. I've lived what I've lived in the Navy and all over the world, and especially in the Strait of Hormuz, because it was my job to try to keep it open. We're going to continue to bring you what you need to know so you're informed, because I'm telling you now, the misinformation machine is running. But you know what? Those of us who've done it, you can't bullshit us. So that's why we're here. I appreciate you watching. Please follow us on Substack and continue to push that and DM me questions. I'll do my best to answer them. Until then, I'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.